It's time to wake up and pray up here on the Finding Faith and Losing Sleep podcast. Hey, thank you so much for taking a moment out of your day or your night, whenever you're listening to the podcast, for just taking your day to share with us. We are three regular people trying to journey our way through life. And we do it a little bit by using the Bible, some wisdom that we've retrieved from God over the years. And that's just how we do it. We're not scholars. We're not anything that are magnificent people going through all kinds of schooling and everything to learn all kinds of book knowledge. No, we're not. It is me, Wes Easley. It is Pierre Wilson and his wife, Michelle Wilson. Hello, Pierre and Michelle.
Hi, Wes.
Hello.
All right. Did I describe us well enough or should I? I mean, I think I'm dumber than what I even said.
No, you're smarter than you give yourself credit for. But you're right. We're not theologians, I believe is the term, and we're just living life ourselves, and we're diving into our faith, and there's some things that we question, and some things that keep us awake, and we decided to throw a podcast together and just talk through it because we think these are conversations that others are wanting to have it, and it seems like listeners are enjoying it, so we continue to dive into it.
I think when you say theologians, it's supposed to be theologians, like you just got to sound smart. You got to throw your tongues together like this, I think that's just how it has to be. And I want
every person that's ever studied theology.
That's okay. They've tuned us out a long time ago, Pierre. Those people have tuned us off. I wanted to say that early on in this podcast. Well, first, I wanted to thank everybody for listening. That's always important to do because people do take moments out of their day to be able to download and then be able to listen. And we do just appreciate the opportunity to be able to share our lives and our thoughts with you. And we appreciate the feedback that you give to us as well. And so I will encourage everybody just to take a moment and like this show or, hit the stars or however you can do that. Leave a reply or leave a comment in the comment section of whatever listening platform you like to listen to the podcast on. It does help with the algorithm. It helps get the show out there. That's not for our own benefit. It is for the show's benefit. And hopefully people can see that we can work our way through life with some godly wisdom through a biblical perspective on all the different things that are going on in the world today. Because, guys, it's getting crazy out there. It's been crazy out there, but I think it's about to get even crazier.
Probably, and it's unique. I mean, it's unique times, and I think every day is unique. Every new day is just that. It's a new day for all involved. Blessed to make it each day. But as we get ready to dive in, I think some of the things that maybe we're being spoken to, back with Genesis 6 that we're going to dive into are some things that we also see now, and so it's good to just try to tie it together. Different times, different lifestyles, but, still some similarities that we can discuss.
Michelle, I have I've been studying the Bible and in church for a long time now. Mm-hmm. And I'm a good parent, Michelle. I can say all the things that need to be said. Does that make sense?
Sure, it does.
But whenever I open up the Bible and I start reading it, I try to take off my parrot lenses, my parrot eyeglasses, if that makes any sense. I try to take those off and just look at it again, for the very first time, because when I started reading the Bible 30-something years ago, I really wasn't smart back then. I mean, I never read books. I never did anything. I never had any critical thinking. I never had any deep thinking skills or anything. And I think over the years, because now I'm in my 50s. I think I've developed some of those things a little bit more, and I've been able to take my barstool education that I had before I became a Christian into my now Christian life, where I've been learning a lot more things. And so I try to put on, I don't know, both shoes, I guess, and to be able to walk through the Bible that way. I don't know if I described that right, Michelle, but it's just this chapter is one of those chapters where I can say all the right things, but at the same time, if I look at it with both shoes on, the path that I can go down is just crazy.
Well, I think what you're saying in a nutshell is you read it differently based on the experiences that you've had and the wisdom that you've found throughout the years. Because I think it's just like any movie or any book that, we read or we watch. Depending on your perspective at the time, it's going to depend on what you take out of it. And you might miss something. Like you might see the same movie 10 times, and then all of a sudden that 10th time you're like, I don't remember seeing that in there before. And I think it's all because of the experiences that we have and how we're feeling at the time that we watch it, what we take from it. And honestly, I think that's why some people find comfort in watching the same movie over and over again, is that it's predictable. Like Pierre gets on me because I like Hallmark movies, right? Like he's like, it's ridiculous.
They're so bad.
He thinks they're terrible. He's like, oh, here go your terrible movie watching again. But here's the thing. I think I enjoy it because it is predictable. Like, even though I know what the outcome's going to be, I can just sit and relax and live in that and find my happy place of like, just being joyful. And so I think, Wes, when you read the Bible, depending on where you are in your life and what is going on is going to depend what you get out of it and how it speaks to you. And I think that's really powerful. And I think it's good when we have experiences. And honestly, like Pierre, like you guys both said, that's why we do this podcast, because we all get something different at different times in our lives. And it's so important to always be grounded in the Bible and to come back to say, okay, this is how I'm feeling about this. What does this say to me now? So, I mean, I don't know if that's what you were asking me about, but that's how I took it.
No, I'm glad you took it some way, because I'm never quite sure what I'm going to say whenever I do open up my mouth. Pierre, I am nervous about this episode because I have learned a lot of weird things. And man, brother, I know you're weird too sometimes. You've not been shy about opening up the old weird door and walking through there and giving out some scenarios of possibilities. Mm-hmm. And I feel obligated. I don't know if it's morally obligated. I don't know if I'm feeling this way because I do want to do the Bible do justice. God has granted me so much mercy, so much grace throughout my life. And I do give him all kinds of credit for everything that I've ever been able to accomplish in my life. And that's just still being alive to this day. Mm-hmm. And I want to be able to do Genesis chapter 6 justice because I believe I owe it to him and I owe it to the listeners,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's every episode. So true. One of the main reasons that we dove into this is we were hoping to at least hit, one person that we could have an impact on. And, as we continue to have more episodes and as we continue to grow in our faith, like I know one of the topics that we have at church right now is kind of what's the impact that you're leaving behind. If there's one thing that's definite, it's, we're going to all pass away someday. And, what's that impact that we're leaving behind? And to me personally, one of those impacts is this podcast. Mm-hmm. Like, even when we're gone, like depending on, if it's me just passing away or if Jesus comes back, whatever's first, this podcast could last and it could impact, my daughter. It could impact if she has kids, they might listen to it. It could impact strangers. There's songs, from years and years ago that still have impact. What's the difference, with this podcast kind of doing the same thing? So absolutely, I want to be able to have real conversation and talk through it because you never know who it could touch down the line.
So
the probably changed the podcast name from Finding Faith and Losing Sleep to A Donkey and Two Farmers or something. That's probably what they'll change it to.
It's Tittles and whatever.
Johnson Tittles. That's past podcast episodes, which are all able to be listened to on whatever listening platform you like to listen to the show on. You can download all those and find out all the Jot and Tittles. I think we should have named that one Jot and Tittles, my friend. All right, let's
Tittles with Wes Easley.
Excuse me. Let's jump into Genesis chapter 6, and that's all a precursor to this because Genesis 6 is fun, man. It's fun. I love studying this chapter with people who are a little bit hesitant about studying the Bible or about Christianity. I say, well, what about Genesis 6? And they'll be like, what do you mean? What's in Genesis 6? And I start reading Genesis 6 and their eyes just get big. And they're like, that's in the Bible? That's weird. What does that mean? And so you can just kind of get that as a jumping point, but it's an intriguing chapter that some people don't even realize is in there. And you got to really look into it. So I'm going to start there. Okay. I'm just going to go. Now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land. All right, we got a little bit of context. I guess we got to go context here. This is right after the Garden of Eden. This is right after Cain and Abel. This is right after the they give the genealogy of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. This is right after all that stuff. So this is like part 2. This is almost like chapter 2. I know it's chapter 6 in the Bible, but it seems like it's if you're doing a play, this is like act 2, right?
This is like the time where Earth's no longer that perfect paradise that God intended it to be.
Yeah. It came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. Let's stop right there. Can we stop right there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what to start with. I want to stop. And I guess just verse 2. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. Who are the sons of God?
That's what I was getting ready to say.
So my thought process are Seth and his kids. And the only reason I think that way is so we just came from, as you mentioned, Cain and Abel and kind of what took place there. And then when it goes into the genealogy a bit, it talks about Seth kind of being that line to God and ultimately Jesus. So I go to them being like Seth's sons, and I go to the daughters being maybe like through the Cain lineage. Personally is how I take it. I think you could also read it like, are these like angels that come and mate, with humans? I can understand where that could come into play too. But my initial thought is that it's kind of separating pretty much believers versus non-believers. So the sons of God are like your believers in him that were men, and they went on to mate with non-believing women is my interpretation of it.
Well, and my descriptor in the bottom of like my Bible says some people have thought that the sons of God were fallen angels, but this is unlikely because angels do not marry or reproduce. Some interpreters believe this phrase refers to the descendants of Seth who intermarried with Cain's evil descendants. This would have weakened the good influence of the faithful and increased moral depravity in the world, resulting in an explosion of evil. So you kind of touched on both of those.
The Bible seems complicated, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big book. It's got a lot of names that we're unfamiliar with from a long time ago that, and when you can't shake somebody's hand or, the Bible isn't really descriptive about the main characters. It doesn't really tell you what Jesus looks like. We rely on historical evidence for that. But it just doesn't describe these people, so they don't become really personable with us from a visualization standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the Bible, I think it's easier if we just try to keep things simple. Okay, if we just kiss it, if we just try to keep it simple.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say that you thought it was the sons of God, and I didn't want to put my 2 cents in until after I heard what you guys kind of thought. I've always thought that. I've always thought it was just the sons of God. It was who God's children were supposed to be. It was his children, and they varied off. They saw women in foreign lands, and look, when people look different, we're kind of like, oh, that's kind of intriguing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they just look different than their people that were around them, and they're like, hey, she's got kind of dark skin, that tan. Look at the tan on that one. Yeah. So maybe that's what the sons of God were thinking. And they intermarried with them. And then all of a sudden now you're diluting God's lineage. You are diluting what he's taught the people and what has been passed around through generations because maybe they worshiped other gods, right? And we go back to what the 10 Commandments is, which hasn't been written yet, by the way, but it doesn't mean that the 10 Commandments weren't in effect and weren't verbalized rules throughout the time period. It wasn't, so it doesn't mean those things. But it just kind of dilutes all that stuff, I believe.
Well, I'm not even sure it's even just different skin color and things along those lines. I think it could be as simple as, again, believers versus non-believers. So just take like a pastor that's a righteous man that maybe has a downfall. So I think we watched Hillsong, the big Hillsong church. So there's a pretty popular younger pastor that was doing really good things throughout Hillsong's growth, really mostly throughout the United States. So they were big over, I believe, in Australia, and they started to have a really big boom in the U.S. And they had a really young pastor that was pretty hip and all about it, and married. And I just think about someone like that maybe is considered a son of God, as a righteous person, that becomes attracted to someone that clearly is unrighteous, be it a prostitute, a hooker, whatever you want to say. It's one of those on the dark side. And I think, like, growing up, we kind of all have those type of situations. I know a lot of the girls, like bad boys, when I was growing up, they wanted the motorcycle and the tattoos, and those that are probably making bad decisions. Not saying that all motorcycle and tattoos did that, and even with the men, like, men kind of wanted that party girl, or the loud one, the popular one that was kind of wild and crazy. That could be the same thing back here, where you can have some really righteous men that came and found themselves attracted to unrighteous women, and then that wickedness kind of started to spread, because it took away the righteousness that was left in the world and started to corrupt them. And I think that's kind of what plays into this whole wickedness in the world portion of Genesis 6.
Instead of hookers or prostitutes, can we just refer to them as women of the night, Pierre? Come on. This is a family show.
I've never heard women of the night. I have heard what I said, so I'm just keeping it real.
All right. Yeah, I do too. I mean, I want to keep it simple, so I that's the direction I'm going to go. And I'm going to get weird here in a minute. All right, let's just get weird here in a minute. I'm going to get weird here in a minute. And I know what you said about the fallen angels and angels. This may possibly. I'll swim around to that here in a minute. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Verse 3. Can we move on? Good.
Verse 3.
Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh." I got to go there. He is also flesh. Also is like an inclusive word, isn't it? Am I saying that right? I mean, you guys are the English scholars here. I'm not.
Far from it. Far from it. So
if I also is also.
Well, mine says, then the Lord said, "My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. So in mine, it doesn't say also.
Okay.
I don't know.
How about yours, Pierre? You're good?
Yeah, mine's is similar to Michelle's. It's just, not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. So, I mean, the also would kind of add in a little bit more context.
Sure would.
Which, again, I think, we missed the context of the Bible because we weren't there. We weren't living back then. We don't know the context of which this was written. But that one word would change so much.
Yes, it would.
When you think about it there.
I do have a little footnote here that does say that, that is going astray. He is flesh. So I'm going to go with the footnotes on this one.
Yeah.
I'm going with the footnotes on this one. He is flesh, and that God is not. Verse 4, the Nephilim. That's how you say it, I believe. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. And the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of his thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. I feel sorry for God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do. Have you felt that way before about something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it about my kid. She's a good kid, so it hasn't been a case. But
I didn't mean it like that.
that's ultimately what it is. Like,
yes.
We're his creation. So I'm sure that there's been parents that have felt that way, where they've had a child that has just gone so far astray that they regret having kids. And I think that's kind of what this situation is. Like, the tough part is you have to believe that God knew this was going to happen back in Genesis 1. Yet here we are in 6, and he's still like heartbroken that it couldn't have been different. It couldn't have changed. Think of folks again with parents of, let's say, a mass murderer or something like that. there's going to be hurt and regret. Even though you're their parent, you're going to have heartache. You're going to wonder if there's something you could have done differently, something you could have done better. You have to think that maybe, the God of the world thought the same. We're made in his image, so why wouldn't he have similar type of hurts and regrets?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just read that, and I get sad because my child has sinned. I've sinned before, and I'm sure my wife has had many regrets similar to God about me whenever I've made a mistake or two in the past, and so that's one of those things where God becomes a little bit more real to me because I can understand those emotions because I've seen my child fail before at something whenever they've tried to do the right things, but they fail at doing the right things. And I don't say I regret making them, but at the same time, you're kind of like, oh, I thought I did better than that.
Yeah.
I this is on me more than it's on them, but I failed them somehow, some way is what I kind of, one of the emotions that go through my head. I also think they should know better than that. I've taught them better than that, but then I go, maybe I haven't taught them better than that. A lot of emotions go through here. So I'm glad God can become more personable because of this little incident right here that occurred in history. By the way, the title of this chapter in my Bible,
Mm-hmm.
It says the corruption of mankind. That's such a bold statement. The corruption of mankind. Wow. Wow.
Wickedness in the world. So We're just a little deeper.
Well, yeah, in both of yours. Mine just says the flood. Okay.
Nephilim. This is where we get into the fallen angels thing, in my opinion, possibly.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever heard of the book of Enoch before?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the book of Enoch, not canonized, not in our Bibles anyway. It's not in there, but it's a book that's out there, and it explains a little bit more about what Nephilim is, or it goes in detail about it. I'm not saying that it's accurate. I don't know. Yeah, that's something you got to do yourself. I can tell you why it's not canonized. I can tell you why these books are canonized. It happened a long time ago. So you got to use that decision-making process of your own to be able to get through that and figure out whether or not the watchers that the book of Enoch talks about are real. And if they are, maybe this is where you got the Zeus, right? You got the Zeus. I don't think it's the Zeus. You got the sun gods. You got different kinds of gods like that throughout history that different civilizations ended up worshiping. And that's where some people point back to this part of the Bible and say that's who the Nephilim were. That's who the great men of old were. So that's what they kind of point at, or the what they say where is it? Right there. Oh, those were the mighty men of old, men of renown. And that's when it's talking about Zeus and Mercury and all the different people that we see as like Greek gods, I guess it is. And they point to this as possibly being that possibility of when they were introduced.
Well, I even tied into maybe the Goliath,
mm-hmm.
History themselves, because they're talked about at times of being like giants and bigger and strong. And so again, you think of them being the heroes, like if there's the whole body of Nephilim like that, then why wouldn't, they themselves kind of have their own lineage that they kind of passed down along. So that was my thought, just into what Nephilim were, that perhaps Goliath was kind of an ancestor of this type of being.
Well, mine actually calls them giant Nephilites, and says they were probably 9 or 10 feet tall, and most likely the ancestors to Goliath. So,
and something else that's weird. Whenever you look at like ancient civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
Like the pyramids. How'd the pyramids get there?
Mm-hmm.
Who built those? And by the way, the pyramids, not only are they huge structures with very big blocks, but the blocks aren't all the same size. And the way they're constructed, they are so pinpoint in accuracy. It would take a very smart person to do that, not a dumb old civilization just putting rocks on top of each other. It would no, that's not how it went. It couldn't be, because not only did they have it in that one area, like a Great Pyramid, which was at one point the largest structure on the entire planet, I believe, the tallest one, but there were pyramids all over the world that were built. How does that happen? with the same kind of precision that like a Great Pyramid was, or even all the pyramids in Egypt. How did they get made, and who lifts them, and who moves them, and so many questions like that I don't know that we'll ever have the answers to. But we can point at maybe a chapter like this and say, okay, there could have been 9 or 10 foot dudes walking around constructing things, and then you look at like castles, or you look at different buildings that had huge doorways and had huge doors that opened up sky high. Why would they build them so high, other than people had to walk through them?
Both walking through them and just the request of those that want it. So like think of just today, all the big houses. I know they're not, made like they were back then, but all these things are man-made. So think of what, the wealthy have built from a mansion standpoint, a house standpoint, and what's to stop that from happening back then, where you have someone of power, of authority, just wanting something gigantic that lasts forever. And obviously in making something gigantic, you're going to want to have those that potentially are building it for you to be able to get in and out as well. So that's a good point. But I think that's kind of where it comes from, or could have come from, at least with some of the wealthy, those of power, requesting these structures to be built in order for them to kind of flex themselves on who they are and what their power is.
Not only could these people have been physically big specimens, but if let's just hypothetically speaking, maybe fallen angels, watchers, whatever you want to call them, but also mentally, maybe they were superior than we can imagine as well. Like it's hard to imagine somebody walking around that's 8, 9, 10 foot tall, right? As big as Goliath. It's hard to imagine that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's fun whenever you're talking about it in a kid's story, but then you actually visualize it and you're like, that would be really scary, But maybe they were really smart too. And they knew how to have the cutting tools to be able to make those kind of structures along the way, to move those kind of things. Maybe they had some kind of knowledge that that got lost over a period of time. I don't know. But you know what I know, Michelle?
What?
To sit there and not say that there is some credibility to those thoughts, or at least to be able to say, I don't know the answers to those questions, but they're pretty good questions. To say, no, that could never happen. To me, that shuts off the possibility of any of that happening, but also shuts off people from listening to you about the rest of the Bible, because this is a weird part of the Bible, but the Bible we've found out to be pretty weird all the way through it. So even the story of Jesus coming to the earth and dying for our sins, that's a weird story as well. So if we can't listen to what other people maybe think, and we just close it off because we're Christians and it just sounds weird, well, the whole Bible sounds weird to them. So why would they even listen to any of it?
Right. It's true. I mean, it does. I think that's why we talk about this, is because as humans, sometimes it's just really tough for us to wrap our brains around some of the things, a lot of the things in the Bible, because number one, it's not, I mean, it is happening now, but what we're reading happened so long ago that a lot of these things are so hard for us to just comprehend. So I think that's why this is important.
I agree. And remember who wrote Genesis? Moses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why did he write it? Because the children of Israel, while they were wandering through the wilderness or under his control or under his leadership, they were asking questions, and they were like, where did we come from? Moses, could you tell us how did those buildings get there? And so maybe this was part of that explanation. I don't know. And
right.
that's why I said that stuff at the beginning of everything, because I do like to keep an open mind. I do like to hear a lot of different stuff. Doesn't mean I agree with it all, and doesn't mean I'll ever come to a conclusion about it all, because I don't want to pretend that I'm a know-it-all, because I don't know it all. And I've learned so much from not knowing it all that I want to continue to not know it all.
Yeah, it makes sense. But I mean, it also, like, think of how enlightening it is once you do know it, though. I know you're not going to know it all, but think of situations that even like today's society that we would say, okay, that's impossible. There's no way that took place. And then we get like the facts, or we get the images or the videos, and you're like, oh, that really was a thing. and maybe it would have been exaggerated or something along those lines along the way, or maybe it's even bigger than you thought it would. But there's still situations now where you can read something or see something, and it's not the same, and until you've actually witnessed it. Then you're like, oh, okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe there's something to this.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Neighborhood kids are walking in my door right now. That's the kind of house I have. I have a house where neighborhood kids come in just to see what I'm talking about, I guess.
That's right.
I'm going to stand up on my desk and I'm going to pretend I'm a Nephilim and just scare the.
Well, we're not far past Halloween, so
That's true. The Lord said.
Where we stop? Like this next verse is like, I know you mentioned your grace and mercy. I think we've always talked about our grace and mercy. I feel like the next verse is kind of where that comes into play here, all the way back in Genesis 6.
The Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord.
Right there.
Yep.
That's your salvation verse. So he's getting ready to, he's basically going to wipe the earth clean. He's going to start from scratch, potentially. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And there's that grace and mercy moment from God right there.
Well, yeah, I think this tells us, like, God was sorry that people chose sin and death over a relationship with him. And even though Noah wasn't perfect, and neither are we, like, he found favor with Noah. So I think that should be encouraging to all of us. Yeah.
No, for real, it should be. And I think I plugged this once or twice, the Genesis Museum or the Creation Museum.
Mm-hmm.
They have it set up to where you walk in and you kind of go back to prehistoric days and you just keep following this path right through biblical timeline, I guess it is. And you just keep walking through this, I don't want to call it a maze, but it's just how the museum kind of pushes you. And you get over to the Noah part. Oh, it's so cool. It's kind of cool. It's kind of weird because it has those 3D animatrix guys like you would see at Showbiz Pizza or something.
Those used to scare
but I mean, it's high quality. Don't get me wrong. I did not expect this place to be as high quality. I thought it was going to be in some dude's barn, okay, and it was just going to be all made of. But this was high quality stuff, and they had people working on this what looks like a boat or an ark. We know it's the ark, but they had people working on it. But it was all those animatronic things. I don't even know if I'm saying the right word there. And then you had this guy looking at these plans and somebody else standing next to him. And the guy working on the plans, you figure out is Noah, because he kind of turns to the guy. He says, man, it's really coming along well. Noah's going to have a Southern accent because I live in the South. he says, man, it's really coming along well. Yes, Noah, it is. We got the wood coming in for all this. Well, that's great. Have you thought about turning back to the Lord? And Noah starts giving up the gospel like that right there. And it's cool to see that. I never visualized it. Ken Ham and all those people did a great job of putting those things together. And it always, this chapter always reminds me of that now because it's so strong. It's so strong whenever I saw it. Not as strong as when Methuselah was standing there in a corner, or I'm sorry, he was sitting there Indian style in the corner. And he kind of sneaks up on you. It doesn't really sneak up on you, but he's sitting in the corner. You don't even know he's there until you walk by him. And he goes, I'm Methuselah. I'm the oldest person in the Bible. And it's honestly, it creeped me out. It creeped me out.
It sounds like it. Is that the one, Kentucky, Cincinnati?
Yeah. Great vacation spot. So many things to do there in that area. And that is one of the things that you could do. It's well worth it. Don't even think twice about spending that money, however much it is. I can't even remember how much it was. Don't think twice about it. It was so worth it.
Good to know.
Yeah.
It's by the way, the podcast is not sponsored by anybody. No, I'm just I do too. I like that part. And I like that God wants us to succeed. Noah found favor in God's sight, and we do too. Men find favor in God's sight And that's why he made us a way to be able to be reconciled to him, because he does want to be with us. He wants us to be in his presence. He wants us to be in fellowship with him. He wants to be in a relationship with him. And I think that that's what the entire Bible is written for, is so that we can find a way to God. And it shows how God always finds his way to us. God doesn't move. God, he will find us, and he will reconcile, gives us an opportunity to reconcile ourselves to him. And that's the beautiful thing about it. He does that for all of mankind. And he could have said, just forget it. But Noah was obviously an upright and honest man. Thank you so much, Noah.
Yeah.
but thank you for being that guy. I appreciate it. And I thank all the men or women out there who are still the Noahs of this generation, who are giving people an opportunity to be reconciled through God, to God, through what those people show them. There's a lot of Noahs in this world. We need more Noahs in this world, because the world is sinking all around us. The world is full of sin all around us. And we can see from Noah that you can not be a part of that, and you can lift yourself above all that and stand out in the crowd, and God sees that. Don't for a moment think God doesn't see those little bits of honesty that you have, the little helping out of the old lady somewhere, the being kind to your neighbor. Don't think God doesn't see that. God sees that, and he wants that, and it's so inspirational to so many people. If it wasn't for Noah, the story wouldn't end as well as it does, guys.
It's true. And I mean, you see it throughout the Bible. Like, all it takes is one righteous person to kind of change the course of history.
Mm-hmm.
You can say it with, Abraham, to an extent. I know we say it with Noah. I believe even when you go into the very sinful place, Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Even with they're asking, God, if there's one righteous, would you save it? Yes. If there's two, would you save it? Yes. As long as there's one righteous person available, in God's eyes, like he's going to show grace, and he's going to show mercy to more than just them at times. But there are also times where he just saves that righteous person, be it through a boat, be it through them removing themselves or getting them away from the city that they're in. But that should be encouraging to all to continue to stay the course, to continue to, fight for being righteous, because you could be the one in your generation, in your time, that impacts the lives of others down the road.
I think that's the moral of the story, right? Strive to be righteous.
These are the records of the generation of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Noah walked with God. Oh boy, that'd be good on your tombstone, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. You know what I thought of one time? Whenever I was reading through the Bible, and I decided I'm not skipping over the genealogies. I'm reading the genealogies, and so I'd read the genealogies, right? And it was always this person begat that person, this person begat that person. They lived 190 million years and begat that person. It was weird that it came in verse 10 that it puts all 3 sons all in the same verse. Mm-hmm. And I was like, are they triplets? Just wondering. Just wondering.
You never know.
You never know. Just something to pay attention to as the story unfolds. Now, the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. And God said to Noah, now this is kind of neat. God talking to Noah. I know I hear the voices sometimes, and I'm not going to say it's God, but you just have the intuition or whatever. I think this is different. I don't think this is like something telling me I should go here or I should go there or something. Just the little intuition, the still small voice inside of you or whatever. I think this is different.
I think so right. too, and I think at times like it's kind of hard for us to imagine actually hearing like the voice of God, and I started thinking about like all the distractions that we have in today's time versus back then, whether it be technology, even books, reading materials, just all the things that kind of take your attention away from just being in quiet, being still, being in peace, that maybe they had more of back in the day. They didn't have TVs, they didn't have cell phones, computers, cars to get them quickly from place to place. They were probably just out, in nature. Some didn't even have, big, not like houses. There were tents and, huts and things along those lines that took place. So think about just you being in silence, one with nature, like how more likely you would be to hear something if you weren't distracted by things surrounding you.
Well, and I think we've talked about that in previous episodes, right? Like, distraction is the work of the devil. Like, so I think if we're not distracted and the devil isn't at work like that, you would be more apt to hear God's voice.
No, I agree. It would be. And maybe in today's society that we can't hear God's voice, maybe he doesn't want to be recorded, because people would be recording it, if they could somehow. Could you say that a little louder, God, right here into the phone? Yeah, it was different definitely back then. The end of the flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence. What, Pierre?
So I'd probably freak out. Like,
oh yeah, oh no.
If that was truly the case, it was like Pierre. I'd be probably wouldn't be the same. So sorry, go ahead.
No, then it'd be Pierre. Why did you just wet yourself? That's what.
I think you know why.
The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence because of them, and behold, I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with rooms. You shall cover it inside and out with pitch. And this is how you shall make the length. And he gives all the dimensions there. And then he says, you make a window for the ark in verse 16. And finish it to a cubit from the top, and set it for the door of the ark, and in the side of it. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. And behold, I am bringing the flood of the water upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life from under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you, and every living thing of the flesh. You shall bring 2 of every kind into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds after their kind, and the animals after their kind, of creeping things of the ground after their kind, 2 of every kind shall come to you to keep them alive. And as for you, take for yourself some of all the food which is edible, and gather it to yourself, and it shall be for food for you to eat, and not for them, and for them. Thus Noah did according to all that God had commanded him, so he did. All right, so we got to address this, right? The dimensions, big boat. It ain't a little boat; it's a big boat, right? Big ark. Got to hold up to a lot of rain. Got to hold up to a lot of wind. Got to hold up to a lot of storms, right? So it's a big thing. And it's got to house a lot of animals. All the animals? Guys, all the animals?
It seems like it.
It does. How big do the animals have to be?
They're going to be pretty big if they're like the animals we see today.
Giraffes? We're talking about giraffes? Because, in all the little pictures, we got giraffes, and we got elephants, and we got all the little things in the kids' books. We got everything, right?
Okay.
Does it have to be everything?
It doesn't, because we don't know what existed at that point in time. There still could have been. There still are. I mean, look at us. There's still creations beyond that point. So not necessarily every animal was in existence
that we know.
Well, and then for me, I've always wondered, like, did that include snakes? Like, I know it says animals that scurry along the ground.
I'm not getting on a boat with no snake.
But that's what I'm saying. But I mean, truly, like, it doesn't say specifically. I mean, I know it doesn't say specifically like a lot of things, but just given that, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, like, would that have included snakes? And I feel like no, but I don't know.
So we talked earlier about where did Cain and Abel find their wives, right? Or where, and we said, well, maybe it could have been because it was outside of necessarily Jesus's timeline or Jesus's genealogy, that there were other civilizations outside of that as well. And we looked in Genesis 6, and we see that maybe there was possibly that even goes along with this a little bit more. Well, maybe God made more animals after the flood. I'm just supposing, just because the Bible doesn't tell us he didn't, or he did, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. I'm trying to make sense of this from a physical aspect. Okay, I'm trying to make sense of this in the world that I'm living, that God is describing here in Genesis chapter 6. I'm trying to make sense of it with my own brain and my own knowledge and my own hands, because it seems like it'd be really difficult to put two of everything, that all the animals that we've ever seen. Maybe it was just two of the animals in that area. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, in addition, like, so given how big this ark is, like, who's building it? If Noah's the only righteous, if he's the only righteous man, and he's only got 3 sons, how long would it actually take to build an ark to hold the type of animals we presume were actually on there?
Or could it have been giants helping build this thing?
Exactly. Like, there's so many ins and outs that
Noah hiring people to do
take
this.
place, and because essentially, like, you're talking about a place that hadn't seen like water. Like, this is a laughing stock. There's water. There's no rain. Are you kidding?
There's no rain. Yes, it hasn't rained yet. It has.
So,
that's the other thing.
He's building a boat in a desert.
Yeah.
Like, you look like an idiot.
You and let's say 3 sons. Like, it's gonna take a while, depending on what you're thinking these animals are. So again, there's a lot of context we're missing, and I think sometimes that throws people off immediately. They see that and they're like, okay, there's no way. But what if you think about it from a fact that there was a way? There's 2 options. There's both sides to a coin. A lot of people assume it's not possible versus assuming that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And the it's possible has a lot more into it. Even in your own lives, when you're making decisions about yourselves, let's say you're trying to win a gold medal. The it's not possible versus the it's possible is a completely different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I try to do when I read the Bible. I try to think of ways that make this possible. And sometimes it's not being the extravagant ark that many are making it out to be. Sometimes it's a huge boat that has enough, for a family and for some common animals to be filled in it. Sometimes that's a logical one for me.
Well, and this thing wasn't just a little raft. Like,
right. Exactly.
It was from what I've read, it was the length of 1.5 football fields, mm-hmm. and as high as a 4-story building. And it was exactly 6 times longer than it was wide, which, hey, side note, is the same ratio that modern shipbuilders today use. So go figure. So, and like we said, it was built miles from any water. And so, like, that's faith right there. That is the epitome of faith.
And there has to be other people involved.
Yeah. Yes.
No, there does. Even in 120 years, one man's not going to be able to do this. But I figured it out.
Okay. Tell it to the listeners. Here we go, listeners. Wes has it figured out. Take a listen.
Take a listen. Are you ready?
Yep.
Noah, being the righteous man that he was, he hired the sons of God. He hired the Nephilim. He hired the giants of old to build this huge ship, right? And to go out and gather the animals like the elephants. Hey, these Nephilim, they could just wrestle the elephants and get them in there. If they wanted to. They just rode them to the ark. Hey, get them, get that giraffe, get that rhinoceros, just ride them into the ark, I'm kind of exaggerating that part, but maybe that's how he got the ark built. He got the big old guys to do it. He hired them out to be able to do it. They needed money to go around and womanize and drink booze, didn't they?
It's true. And then you think about the flood, and it could have wiped them clean.
Yeah. Just a thought. But seriously, to think that God cannot gather those animals together in that one area, even all the animals that we see today, possibly. I don't know. I'm going to tell everybody that, just like we did at the precursor of this show. I don't know. I'm trying to do it justice, but I'm also trying to keep an open mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know throughout the Bible, God can use animals to do things. He used animals to feed prophets, like birds to go and feed prophets. Jesus, whenever he was trying to make a point to the disciples that he called, his disciples, the 10 chosen men, he told them to cast their nets on this side of the boat. And then there was a bunch of fish. He can school up those fish if he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
He has that power because he's the creator. Somehow he knows how to do those things. So could he have sent all the animals to that area and just climbed on the boat? Well, yeah, why not?
You see it with, he did it with what, locusts and, frogs. And we see in our life, like the flocks of birds and stuff that just appear out of nowhere that take over. And even just the intelligence, like you see dogs like saving lives, like jumping in water and saving kids. Like I don't think we give animals enough credit for what God kind of instilled in them. And I always talk about this because our dog personally drives me crazy. At times, still a good dog, but
he's a great dog.
When you think about dogs, they call them, man's best friend. If there's something a dog can teach anyone, I think it's the unconditional love. Mm-hmm. Because no matter what you do, you can yell, scream, whatever. You can get so upset with that animal, and the next time they see you, they are still happy-go-lucky. You're still the best person in the room, and they're super excited. So God gives them that ability, that unconditional love. If he can do that for dogs, for example, what could he do with other creatures throughout this planet?
Well, I funny side note, I heard or read something somewhere that said, like, for a man to shut your wife, your cat, and your dog in a garage with no food or water for 2 days and see which one's still happy to see you when you open the door. There you go. It's the dog.
Unconditional.
That is not a suggestion here of any of us at the Finding Faith and Losing Sleep podcast. Please do not go out and do that to your wife, your cat, or your dog. Here, hold on. You want to go outside? Hey, Fido, you want to go outside? That's a part for the dog. Oh, we even have dogs listening to the podcast now. Maybe.
You want a treat?
Oh boy.
That's what ours likes.
You want to go outside? Guys, I'm going to keep this simple. Let me wrap this all up. I'm going to keep this simple. All right? That's what I am. I'm a simple man. We can get on all these little side notes. What are Nephilim, sons of God? Who built the ark? We can get on all these different things, and it's great to talk about. Don't get me wrong. But let's not lose the point. The point is, God does not like sin. He doesn't like sin. It makes him sad. It disappoints him. But he also looks for ways to find favor in man. And if we are upright and honest people, then he is looking on us with favor. And he is willing to save us from all the corruption that's in the world, all the sin that's in the world, and all the sin that's surrounding us. He is looking to save us. And that, I think, is the main point of Genesis 6. And we can get lost in a lot of different things, but it's the beautiful part of this story is that God loves mankind. And he doesn't want mankind to be corrupt. He wants us to obey the laws, obey his rules that are set there to protect us, not to harm us. And he wants a relationship with us. I think that's it.
I agree. It's the same thing we want for us and our kids.
Right.
Well, and if this chapter wasn't in the Bible, we wouldn't get all them cool little Bible songs. The little kid songs about the arky, all those things. I mean, I'd hate to lose out on stuff like that.
Well, and I think that this chapter really kind of brings it back to, as much as we want to say things have changed, and like that's why the Bible is hard for us to relate to. I think this one shows us that things haven't changed all that much. Like every day, God warns people about like his inevitable judgment, and still people don't believe it's going to happen. So I think this kind of wraps it up and says, hey, things haven't changed that much.
No, I agree with you. Things haven't changed that much. I want to just, you think about all the different parts of the Bible and all the things that it says, and I can't help but think about 1 Peter chapter 3. All right, so I'm just let me read this, and it got weird here. 1 Peter chapter 3 gets a little weird too, but I'm just going to zoom through the weird part and just kind of sum it all up with the part that talks about Noah. Verse 18. Christ also died for sins once for all, just for the unjust, in order that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he sent, this is a weird part, in which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison, who once were disobedient, when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. And corresponding to that, baptism now saves you, not the removal of dirt from the flesh, but an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven after the angels and authorities and powers had been subjected to him. The Bible ties itself together, you know, and all the way in 1 Peter, where Peter's writing about things, and he uses the illustration of the flood and how the flood saved 8 people. And he says baptism is also the thing that saves you in a corrupt generation. In this generation, in Peter's generation, when he was writing this, Christians were being killed for being Christians. And he says, look, don't let that stop you from making a public proclamation of your faith to Christ. Don't let it do it, because the same way that God saved Noah through that public proclamation of there's going to be a boat when there ain't no water, when it ain't never rained, there's going to be water here in this desert. The same way he made that proclamation that people need to be righteous, you're making that same kind of proclamation whenever you get baptized to show people that you are making this a garment clean again. You are making this a reconciliation to God. You are proclaiming your faith to others, and you'll inspire people to do the same thing, just like Noah did.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. That's the goal. And again, it only takes one of us.
It does. Finding Faith, Losing Sleep podcast. That's what this is. Pierre, you can tell them how they can get in touch with us if you still remember how to do that.
Yeah. So at Finding Faith Pod over on Twitter/X, we're there. And then if you want to shoot us an email, we're at findingfaith.losingsleep@gmail.com. Just appreciate, all the listeners, all the reviews. They don't matter. I know they help with the algorithm. They put us out in front of others. So any reviews you're willing to leave would be great. But we ultimately just thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us throughout your day. Hope we're able to just have open and honest conversations that help you along your own journey. And we just look forward to continue to put these out and hopefully make an impact throughout our lifetimes here that may be pushed through to your lifetimes and maybe the lifetimes of others.
And Michelle, what's that cool little catchphrase that I always say at the end?
Pray for us and we'll pray for you.